Video games aren't realistic. Shocker, I know. But when I say that, I'm not talking about nitpicking at uniforms or certain firearms from a specific setting. I'm talking about the big boom itself. Artillery. The more you get into learning about military history, the more it becomes obvious that the most boring stuff is the most important. I mean, this applies to a lot of stuff, but for military history, it rings especially true and much more clearly. Everyone loves to talk about the scale of battles, the size of tanks, the gritty nature of every conflict, but war usually ends up being dudes moving stuff around better or worse than their enemies. This isn't unique to modern conflicts. The Mongols were able to kill like a third of the planet's population, in part because they really got horses and just accidentally invented maneuver warfare hundreds of years before the truck. But you know what's even more prolific than going fast? Artillery. Being able to kill something from as far away as possible is kind of how we got here, like as a species. One of humanity's greatest advantages is the ability to throw rocks accurately. Even today, if you run into a mountain lion on a hiking trail, throwing rocks at it works pretty good. It's up there with like fire. Where am I going with this? Artillery guns since at least World War I have made up more than half of all combat deaths. Honestly, since we figured out how to can food and not die of dysentery constantly, artillery has kind of been the main character, and it comes in a lot of forms, but I mostly just want to focus on the big booms themselves. You know, howitzers and shit. I brought up that bit about warfare mostly being boring crap because artillery guns, despite feeling like the cooler part of war, are a 50-50 mix of both. Using artillery, like actually loading, aiming, and firing the gun, is not fun. Well, at least not for everyone. When most people think of artillery, they think of the end result, the impact of an at least mostly accurate artillery shell hitting its target, the boom. But even firing the gun feels kinda underwhelming after a while. Artillery is most often the best way to inflict casualties on your enemy. Despite this, it doesn't really make that much of an appearance in video games. If you seriously think about it, you really don't touch it in most games, and when you do, it's actually a mortar. In more popular games like Call of Duty, you might have kill streaks that like call in artillery, but Battlefield you'll have like mostly just short-range mortars. And even in more milsim-esque games like Hell Let Loose, artillery sits on the peripheries of the actual game. Chances are you forgot it even existed until a hero round comes screaming in. Artillery is underrated in video games is a hard topic to sell as a video, but like seriously, all throughout history, artillery has been there, it's been prevalent. In the last 100 years to 200 years, it's become even more important. And most video games that are kind of about war take place in the last 100 to 200 years. And despite that, it's really not present. Oh, but Boinga, you just said artillery is boring. I said it was like 50-50. But that's beside the point. If using a normal weapon, like a gun or whatever, was more realistic, that also starts to kind of suck. You just gotta strike a balance. Everything is just about getting away with feeling realistic without being frustrating. I like the way Hell Let Loose does it almost exclusively. It gives you enough information without really telling you where you're firing or where the enemy is, and to me it's the perfect balance. You just line up the line with the marker that you put, and it tells you how many degrees of elevation for every 100 meters, but honestly you kinda gotta wing it after a while. Then you send it downrange and you probably get a kill like 23 seconds later. It's a thankless job, but it's chill. War Thunder might do it the worst of any game I've played. The ability to call artillery in War Thunder has like a minute delay and it only sends a volley of like 5 shells. Ooh. It's extremely underwhelming. And using an actual SPG, the maps are too small and the range on these guns are too big, or most of them. And there isn't even a sight for indirect fire like in real life. You can't even use the tools these tanks really have for indirect fire. Even if you were on a comically large map like Fields of Poland, War Thunder doesn't let you be artillery. Just give me the sight from Hell Let Loose and put it on one of those tier 1 low velocity potato slingers that fire like 150mm HE. And just let me go ham. Whatever happened to freedom, huh? Why do I gotta direct fire at a tank with my howitzer? Is anything sacred anymore? I even tried to make it work against Gaijin's will. I tried learning some like basic math to get the gun elevation and kind of like pre-calc the distance between spawns and choke points to get some long range kills for this video. It didn't work. There's too many variables. You spawn in different places within each spawn, and then there's like even the air pressure changes between maps. Not a lot, but like when you're doing that plus everything else, it's just too much. It doesn't work. The only way to get artillery work in any capacity in War Thunder is just to do what that learner guy does on YouTube who makes videos specifically about that. I did manage to replicate that one thing he did with the helicopter, which is pretty cool, but even that is just like a gimmick. It's not like reliable. It should be reliable though. It should be reasonably reliable. I should be able to shoot around that land directly on top of a tank that refuses to change positions. The same way you can slam dunk an artillery shell into an enemy trench and Hell Let Loose.
Nothing but net, motherfucker.
Once again, I'm gushing over Hell Let Loose because even though it does have its own problems, a lot of stuff there that I find interesting works very well. In Hell Let Loose, if you know where the enemy is clumped up and you send like 6 rounds downrange, you'll get at least one guy. It's not overpowered, it adds a lot to the chaos of battle, and that's another thing. Even being shot at sounds fucking sick. Being the victim of artillery in a video game is kinda awesome. But instead, a lot of games opt for just dudes running at each other and shooting each other in the face. Which is fine, it's a fun gameplay loop, but you know, too many games are just kind of that. When developers tend to innovate, they usually just change where resources are, where guns are, where this is or that is, and what the ultimate end goal is. That's how you get extraction shooters, that's where you get battle royales. But they never really changed like the core of it, the core of people shooting at each other. And that's what indirect fire would be good for. It shouldn't be too easy, it needs to be a little bit complicated in order to filter people. It needs to deliberately scare away anyone who isn't willing to put in the effort to learn something new, instead of doing what they already do in every other game. Need some real risk-taking decisions to be made, you know? Need stuff to slow it down. I don't care if the unwashed masses want slide-canceling movement shooters. Sentence them to 5 hours of crafting horseshoes in Kingdom Come Deliverance. Maybe it'll fix something in their dopamine receptors. And if that doesn't work, shock therapy. But War Thunder could really benefit from taking notes about the advent of teamwork and combined arms warfare in the game. They advertise as being about combined arms warfare, even if indirectly. Because what else would be the end goal of War Thunder as a game? What, you're going to add tanks from every role and just not use them for what they were intended? Actually, that's exactly what they would do. You know, you could probably solve most of War Thunder's problems if they just had more game modes. They've been shuffling around points for a decade. Time to get a new bit. You just gotta shake up the formula a bit. Gotta stop a game from being just peeking around the corner or running and gunning everywhere. And what better way to do that than to hit them over the head with something completely out of their control? No way. Artillery guns are big, and a lot to handle. There's a lot that goes into an artillery gun, so I have to scale it down a bit. Something some dudes could carry. While the big boom of artillery guns is great, nothing is quite as satisfying as the thump. You know what I'm talking about. I shouldn't really be setting these apart from artillery guns. They serve the same purpose I want, but it's only the mortar that really sees use between these war games like Battlefield all the way to Arma. Mortars not only fit into the settings provided by video games really easily, they actually fit into them too well. And Hell Let Loose, it can take a minute to really adjust the gun correctly from one point to another, but mortars, being smaller, can be adjusted much quicker. With a mortar, you can get a quicker response time, you need less teamwork, and you can set them up basically anywhere. This eliminates the rigidity of artillery guns almost entirely, and when you do that, indirect fire becomes too easy. Artillery guns, however, shoot so far away and have such a great minimum distance, it doesn't really make sense for them to exist in those settings unless you just excuse reality, which I'm fine with. Once again, the artillery guns in Hell Let Loose very optimally have you shooting at like 500 to 800 meters away, but that's basically the minimum range of those artillery guns from those periods. Like the absolute minimum. And that's mid-map distance, roughly. Realism in video games is almost entirely stupid, but there is argument for, you know, authenticity versus actual accuracy, but that's a whole nother topic. But it is a video I should probably make at some point. I don't think artillery needs to, or should be in everything, but it should be in more stuff. Like, no way should it be left in a few milsims and Hell Let Loose, and that's basically it. I kind of ignored strategy games entirely because, like, yeah, it's in all those games, but I don't want to watch dudes get blown up like I'm a god. I want to be involved in that exchange on either end. I'm not even picky. But yeah, artillery guns are cool. I think I said everything I wanted to say. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Oh shit. Oh shit, fight back. Fight back. Get him. Oh fuck, where'd he go?